Ron DeSantis is proving in Florida right now that he would be more than happy to stick his hand in there and manipulate that test in any way that he can. And there are large groups of people that want to do the same thing. I'm sure there's people on the left who will say, let's give that, make it a very complicated test and give it to seniors, and now no seniors can vote because they can't think the way they could 30 years ago. And then, so you've got people like DeSantis, you got people on the left who might do the other thing. You're creating something that's instantly corruptible.
Well, this is a fair point. This is a fair point. But what you could have is you could have two things here. You could have a nonpartisan group decide like basically what's on the voter exam every year, or you could have it be by constitutional amendment.
So
I don't disagree with you that. I don't know, not a nonpartisan like.
It doesn't matter that the questions themselves would be nonpartisan when you've already said they'll disproportionately end up favoring your partisan goals. You're like leftism
because the people are smarter, and my goals are shared among smart people. Yes, I'm fine with that.
Oh, people like Ben Carson.
I don't know what Ben Carson's IQ is. All I know is that the people who agree with me tend to be smart. I wonder why.
Well, yeah, because
you're a right winger. That's not true.
Come on, you're literally empowering the people. Yeah, the people who can pass my test are gonna be the ones more likely to agree with me. And then
because they're smarter,
or because you're just
just say, but you don't give a fuck about competency. Then why are you saying competency? Why are you saying IQ? All of this stuff is proxies for conservatives. You just want to basically have affirmative action for conservatives when it comes to
I'm saying competency because competent people. The reason why competent people agree with me for a reason.
Okay, so I just want to say I think Warhammer 40K is very relevant to the conversation we're having right now.
I think always is. But so I'm going to toss over to our friend Counter. But so I just took a citizenship test. I just did that. And I passed, but not by the margin I was hoping.
Are you Canadian now?
And the Canadian.
You're gonna have to go with Lactoid and live in his basement in Canada.
So I
wonder if there's a PragerU test.
So for the citizenship test, at least the old citizenship test, they have a list of 100 questions, my understanding. And then you randomly get like 10 of them, and then you have to answer right at least 6. So I took the older version, I'm assuming, and I got 7 correct. But looking at those questions, I'm wondering why are we asking them? One of the questions was, and I mean it's the one I got wrong, so fair enough, right? So you could just whatever.
It must be a bad question then.
Yeah, it's definitely unfair if I got it wrong. It says the Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Which of these men was not one of the authors? I'm going to read those out to you guys. Maybe one of you guys will get it right or wrong. But why does anyone need to know who wrote who was an author of the Federalist Papers? What does that add to anything? There were other ones that were fair, talking about senators, right? How long does a senator last, right? Everybody, right? How long do they serve?
Yep, sure.
It's 6 to 7 years, right?
3 minutes?
6 to 7, yes.
But 45 seconds.
But in any case, yeah. But so that's what bothers me. But anyway, I'm going to read out the list, right? And you guys
what's
tell
the
me.
difference between Class A, Class B, Class C senator? That's probably on there.
Class A, Class B senator?
No, there are 3 classes of senators, yeah.
Serious? Okay, hold on.
Yeah, because they're staggered. They're staggered for so you get 33 senators 1 year. 2 years later, you get another 33, and then 2 years later, you get 34.
I've never heard of that. I mean, I knew they were staggered, but I never heard there was a term for that. But see, if that was on the test, I'd got them wrong. Anyway, so about the authors of the Federalist Papers, they give you 4 examples here. So which one of these people was not one of the authors? Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, James Madison, John Jay.
John Adams.
Was the author of what?
John Jay?
Not the author. Not the author of the Federalist Papers.
Which of them did not write any of the Federalist Papers?
Did not. Yeah, was not an author. You said John Adams.
C.
I'm just gonna say John Adams because everyone else was saying it. I have literally no idea.
Someone said John Jay. I'm gonna go with that.
Is that how you form most of your opinions, Nina?
It's not an opinion. This is a fucking quiz.
It's a guess.
Lactoid.
It's a literal guess.
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay,
I'm trying to remember.
I'm being
I don't know
honest
the
about
answer
it.
either. Adams
it
makes
Adams?
sense to me
All right,
because
Paul.
he's
I'm trying
not.
to remember. I don't think John Adams supported it.
But if I pause.
Does anyone even know what the Federalist
We're
Papers
just
are?
gonna go down the line. Okay, shut up. We're
Yes.
gonna go down the line, right? So Lactoid says doesn't know. Corey,
I'm
confirmed Canadian. So you don't have to answer.
The
FK,
two Canadians.
Split between Jay and Adams.
Jay and Adams. Okay. Straight.
Adams.
Mia.
Again, as I said, I have no fucking idea, so I'm just gonna say Adams.
Okay, Aiko.
Yeah, again, I don't know either. I'm only saying Adams because he was like the least hot-headed of the group. So
Okay. Paul.
It is 100% indisputably, absolutely Adams.
Counterpoints.
Well, now PF Young made me all fucking nervous and shit, but I was going to say John Jay.
Okay, so the only person I'll give credit to is our friend
PF Young?
Paul, because Paul was the first one that said Adams, and everyone else just glommed onto him. But
yeah.
it was Adams.
No, I
It
actually
was
looked in the
Adams.
chat. Thank you very much.
That's a good point.
Okay, very good. But yeah, that was Adams. But I had no idea.
Neither did
And I don't know.
I just totally
that
fucking
doesn't say
guessed and got lucky, to
anything
be
about
honest.
anyone, right? That doesn't say anything. I mean, like we've already
Not very
confirmed.
American of us, I guess.
Yeah,
Because if you just sound confident and guess the right answer, you'll seem smart.
Okay.
Ooh, Christmas tree C on the test.
Spoken like a white
that's-
boy.
So my only point is that like there are a bunch of questions here that like what does that tell us about an individual, and that should they be a citizen? And if we had asked this, because specifically what's been said is that we give the citizen test, right? We give that test to other people. And Trump has changed the test. That's something else I wanted to add. He is like under his administration. Apparently, he put some changes, expanded the number of questions, and like changed the wording of the questions to make it more difficult. And it'd be harder for English learners. But whatever. But still, in any case, like I don't. If we're talking about this test, I don't know what it says about an individual. If necessarily you don't know some of these. Like, if you give me a random
They can
assortment
study for a test and they can remember factoids about American history.
Okay, so then it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You're just asking them to remember facts things. So why is that important?
Like American citizens should be able to remember facts. Yeah.
My parents passed a citizenship test. And like they've forgotten all that. So I don't know. Like they passed one.
Listen,
both of them.
This is a fantastic point though, because basically the entire American education system is about learning things, being able to pass a written exam, and then forgetting that shit fucking 3 seconds later. Do you know what they're really training you to do? Because I've been in the workforce for 20 years. They're teaching you how to show up to a place that you don't want to be, shut the fuck up, do 8 hours worth of work, clock out, and show up the next day. So if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in America.
Oh, there you go. Counter, if you want to say anything else, you're sounding a little gamey. Counter, you're sounding a little gamey, but
yeah, I can turn it down actually.
Yeah, you're a little bit high, but like I want to ask, like, do you think that? I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but like, I guess maybe this is more of a general question. But do you think that somebody who's planning to be like a, home mom, so to say, should have to answer those questions on the parameters that you're talking about?
Are they a citizen or a non-citizen? And also, am I higher or lower?
You
just sound really.
Yeah, but it's still a little.
I think it might not be using your mic. I think it might be using your webcam.
No, you'll be fine.
I'm using this mic. I'm just fucking with my.
Oh no,
manual game.
that's not.
You're good now.
Yeah.
Okay, it was pissing me off. Discord on somebody else's show, I fucking forget, but it's literally the opposite problem. I need to bump it in order to sound good. I think it's Wick actually.
Yeah, on Wick.
God damn it, Wick.
Yeah, Nina, what's your question? You're saying does a stay-at-home mom need to know this test? And then I asked if they're a citizen or a non-citizen.
Right, like if they're going to be a citizen, you just said if they can't answer those questions, like then they can't work. So, would you still apply to somebody who is not trying to actually work, or does every immigrant have to work?
So if somebody's trying to get here and they want to be a stay-at-home mom and they don't have any productive capacities or whatever, then I would just say skill issue and then catapult them back over the border. And then if they're already here, then very clearly their grandparents had sufficient skills to pass the written test, and then therefore they're grandfathered in. So
yeah, So,
not a moral system.
Thank you, Chandler, for being here. And we'll go to Aiko, and I want to ask a question to Lactwood and Paul.
Yeah, I didn't actually get to ask Lactoid the question I was going to ask him, and he's gone. But hopefully, can he hear me when he's?
Yeah, he should be able to hear you. Right, you can hear him when he curses. That's why we curse him out all the time when he's not around.
So this was going to be my response to him when he talked about like people in the military having more, or men having more value because they can be recruited into the military and like die for their country or whatever. But I would argue that, like I just looked it up, women die in childbirth in rates of about 4 digits. I think the most recent year was 1,200 women died in childbirth, which I think is more than American soldiers have died on an annual basis, at least in the past decade. Or at least I would say these are sort of comparable contributions to society that are, of course, if that many die in childbirth, how many have like health complications further on as well too? Just like a lot of people in the military like have to live with the consequences of their service or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would say
memeing or being serious.
No,
it sounds like a meme, doesn't it?
Well, no, I want to wait. Can I add onto that?
Hold on.
First, let's let Aiko get his point. He was a question. He was asking questions.
I'm just saying, if you're gonna say Starship Trooper style, that risking your life in order to contribute to society is what gives you like the right to participate in society, I would argue that women also, there's a lot more women giving childbirth than there are men who are in active like military situations, put it that way. So I think that they do. There is a like again categorical there's case to be made of that of the gender for just that reason. If you're going to use that,
I assume this is relating to what he said earlier about like, oh yeah, women shouldn't have like the right or whatever because they don't have to go to like.
Let's go to Lactoid.
Well, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here, right?
Well, you just meant they should have greater weight.
Okay.
Okay.
So a couple things here. I never said that men were more valuable. I never said that women shouldn't be able to vote. I didn't think that men should have more weight.
You did say that women, because they don't have to do military service.
You were going similar.
I don't really know what your main thesis was.
I'll tell you where I'm going with
okay, can you explain what you meant by that then?
I'm about to. So I swear to God. This is truly hell.
I'm just asking a question.
So
Nina's earning her keep right now.
You are mistaking like you're mistaking risk of dying with like a legal obligation. Okay, if we had like a legal obligation for women to breed, then I would agree with you that it'd be more comparable. But we don't. Okay, in the same way, we don't like give skydivers or divers or like commercial fishermen.
Hold on.
We don't give these or commercial fishermen or lumberjacks. We don't give them like more of a vote just because they're more likely to die. It has to do with the point that FK made that my response was directly in response to is he said, well, this is not like Lactoid, your whole idea of like voting being like power over the people is wrong. It actually has to do with like all of us as a society all coming together and laws applying equally to all of us. And my only point is laws do not apply equally to all of us. And you mentioned the draft, which is weird that you would start your point with mentioning a law that does not affect
me. You as in ICAO, or you as in
he was talking to me. He was talking to me. But Lactoid, when I say apply equally to all of us, I should clarify. I mean more in the sense of we are represented equally, right? We all have a say in how these laws are kind of like moved around. At the end of the day, some shit happens, but we all had a say in what happens, right? If you didn't
that's not true.
You had the option to go out there and argue that you wanted this to do.
Not if you're 15.
You were given the rights under the American Constitution, right? And if you want to change where voting rights begin and end, then you can change the Constitution. You're also given that right.
No. But your whole premise is wrong. When you say, well, everybody has a say. No, anybody under the age of 18 does not have a say. People who are over the age of 18, but deemed mentally incompetent by a judge,
under the age of 18, many jurisdictions, those people are given the right to go out there and argue that, we should maybe have a say, and they're given the right to protest, and they're given the right to make these movements.
And so I can go out and protest the fact that they vote.
Because guess what? In some you can go out and protest,
and I'm doing that right now.
There's some areas, Lactoid, where 16-year-olds were given the right to vote. Right? There's some local and state elections where 16-year-olds were given that opportunity because their voice is now.
I'll do you one better.
Okay, 14-year-olds then. We're going to play this game?
What's up, Aiko?
We do voter registration drives in my school district. We're actually required by law to do it, but of course, because the Republicans are in charge, they don't enforce that law. So, but what we do is we go around with the League of Women Voters. We try to register as many people who are going to turn 18, which is high school seniors, like in the schools. And it's all of my debate team participates. So I've got 14-year-olds that are having a greater participation in our democratic voting system. Even though they're not voting themselves, they're getting 5, 6, 10 of their friends registered to vote. They're having a larger impact than an individual boomer who goes out and maybe brings his wife with him to the voting booth.
Oh, it's like
wait, hold on, Aiko. Then that's great. Then under me and Paul's system, where there's some people excluded from voting, they can also have more of a political say if they go out and convince capable people to vote, right?
Well, that would certainly be a way to cope with that unjust system.
Yeah. Now it's unjust. Now it's unjust.
I want to move. We have limited time, so I just want to get counterpoints and straight rate.
Well, shit, I wanted to find out what Lactoid's system is, because basically if he's advocating for like a Starship Troopers 2 years of service fucking whatever system, then yeah, like if you're then just articulate it, bud, because I'll tell you my shit.
No, that's fine, Counter.
And I'll tell you mine.
Fair enough. And you weren't here, so I'll absolutely take this opportunity to reiterate it. So
make it quick.
My concept is that in order to vote at all, you should demonstrate on a competency exam some base level of competency, and then like your vote is determined by your IQ. So if you have 150 IQ, you get 150 votes. If you get 70 votes, if you get 70 IQ, you get 70 votes, et cetera, et cetera.
Counterpoints. Yeah, okay, I'll counter that. If you have a 90 IQ, you get to vote, and I get to kind of decide what goes on that test. But like I've decided this based on my own opinion.
Go ahead, no. Yeah, so there's I am perfectly fine with like some base level of competency test. I think you can do it in a nonpartisan way. I do think that we should be able to, like, when we're talking about like civic responsibility, the ability to like answer like a multiple choice test and get like an above 60%, like the standards are at the fucking floor, and we still have to fight tooth and nail in order to get that kind of shit. The reason why I don't think that IQ should be correlated with the power of your vote is because there's like a bell curve with like IQ where there's like, you know, there's people who are retarded who are like under like 80 IQ, and yeah, you should throw their opinions in the trash. Then there's like, you know, 80 to like 120, and those are functional human beings who work their jobs and fucking pay their bills and all that kind of shit. Then there's like 120 to 200, and those people are so fucking autistic that they can do like space level engineering, but they can barely tie their shoes.
Are they any less Americans?
Are
they any less Americans though?
Are they what?
Are they any less Americans?
I mean,
no, but I think Counterpoint's point is that they all get the same vote, right? Unless Counterpoint, are you saying they shouldn't be allowed to vote?
Pay a lower tax rate?
Also, it's hilarious to think that like disabled people are being mobilized to vote in the first place. It's like
this is something I asked earlier.
They do get They do get a vote.
If somebody is mentally stunted, should they be allowed to vote? Counterpoints, like somebody, let's say they do have that 135 IQ and they have like mental disabilities. Should they still be allowed to vote?
If they can pass a basic competency test, but at the same time, like I'm just like trying to latch on to Lactoid's idea. But I'll tell you, like if this country collapses and there's like an anarchic fucking fallout and we have to reconstitute the government from scratch, I actually think that I really do think that like restaurant, retail, fucking military service or government service, 2 years minimum, and if you don't do that, you don't get the fucking right to vote. I don't want all these fucking.
I'd be more on board with that than a voting test.
I am more prejudiced against like upper middle class snobby fucking fail sons who like walked into trust funds. I'm more prejudiced against them than I am against people who work the fucking ovens at my local pizza kitchen, because those people work their asses off, pay their bills, struggle to get by, and try to take care of their shit as best as
possible. That is true, Lactoid. Why would
we're going to sorry. We're running out of time, so I'm gonna go to straight. But very quickly, I as a child I took one of those IQ tests, right? To go into the mentally gifted thing. I officially have an IQ over 130, and I agree about everything Counterpoints just said about me, like everything. Let's go to straight rate.
I wanted to ask Connor something earlier because you said with regards to like the immigration or something like that. Nina asked you like, what about like stay-at-home moms or people who just want to do like domestic work, and you were like, no, sorry. Why? Like, do you not think that domestic work is valued at all?
No, it's insanely valued. It's insanely valued as a culture. I just like I am a civic nationalist in the way that like I don't think that
Nazi?
no.
More like a la Proud Boys, probably.
That's Nazi is ethno-nationalist.
Proud Boys are feds too.
True. But civic nationalist, no,
they're not.
I think
What?
that you should have on. Oh my God, let me finish. So, no, I'm civic nationalist in the fact that I think that if you're coming to this nation, there should be a base level of expectations that are foisted upon you. If you can meet those expectations and you can contribute positively to the society, we'll let you in. And then if you can't contribute positively to the society, then it's up to your host society to figure out what the fuck to do with you. That's not our problem.
A basic liberal principle being able for individuals to choose their own sovereign.
Yeah, but I'm not a liberal. I'm a Republican.
A classical liberal. Of the Lockean kind.
Yeah, but there's also like there's cringe shit that classical liberals also advocate for. So I think like most classic liberals are also just like laissez-faire free market people who don't believe in any level of economic redistribution. And I think that shit's fucking giga cringe because obviously you need some level of institutional support in order to make sure that human beings manifest their ultimate selves. So you need some level of statism and redistributive economics.
Okay, all right. We run out of time, so we gotta move on. And one of our friends is unfortunately going to leave us, but thank you, Paul, for being here. Like Paul, you're awesome. Like I always really enjoy arguing with you. So yeah, let me know when you have time, like for a subject. We're going to have a great time, like yelling at each other.
Paul, I love you.
Paul, you're a right-wing cuck that fucking hates everything that's good in this world, and I hope that you find that out.
Before you go, Paul, can you
sound
answer?
like my mother.
Paul, can you answer why are you opposed to the IQ addition to the test?
I would
why
be
am I opposed to the IQ addition because intelligent people are very good at rationalizing stupid ideas.
So why are you fucking bad at anything then?
I'm for basic Starship Trooper rule. If you're not going to do a civics competency test, I agree. I think we should go civil service.
You understand Starship Trooper was a parody,
fascist
right?
propaganda. Probably.
It's a parody of fascist propaganda. Yes.
I still feel like
I've
it's
never seen
so
Starship
odd.
Troopers. I've just heard the rules.
Oh, so you're just saying things. All right, classic.
I agree with a basic competence test. If immigrants have to pass the civics exam, every American voter should have to as well. Seems like common sense to me.
Oh my god!
And
definition of socialism.
IQ test is a little bit too much. That's weird because you know
little eugenics, eh?
Yeah, you know who had really high IQs? You know
Soy.
Do you know who really had high IQs?
What's your opinion on miscegenation?
Sorry, what'd you say? I didn't even hear what he said. Like he had really high IQs.
The people who had really IQs that demonstrate that just because you have a high IQ doesn't mean you understand anything of value. The postmodernists had high IQs.
Okay, well, there you go.
A little philosophy for you, Aiko.
I'm a leftist, right?
They could also probably pass the competency exam.
I'm a
it just has nothing
leftist
to
with
do
a
with whether or
high
not you have good
IQ,
values.
and I approve everything he says. All right, let's go. Thank you, Paul, for being here. And
I appreciate your sense of humor.
Thank you, guys. Yes, Godspeed.
Good speaking with you, of course.
Good to see you, Connor.
I love you, Paul.
Peace.
Always fun.
Paul was cool before he went all communist at the end there. That was fun.
Oh, you know what?
Oh, he's still here.
I said it earlier. I don't like this idea of immigrants being compared to like American citizens taking the fucking test. All right. The reason American citizens aren't taking that test every month is because we have an expectation that you went through the American schooling system and you probably already went through the process of like learning about these fucking random civics things.
So why are you still retarded after going through education?
Some people might still be. It is, but we have an expectation. Unless you want to argue,
of Americans can actually pass these tests, right?
Yeah,
so
it's fine to say that, but we have an expectation that we've already taught them. Unless you want to argue that you're changing all of society to focus only on this test, and every time we do it, we're like focusing on educating for this one test every year.
I don't know why. I don't know every year thing, but anyway, we're moving on. So thanks all for being here so far. We're going to go on to our next topic.
Really quick. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold the panel. Pause.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just say the really quick thing I just have been wanting to say for a while is just I just wanted to catch up counterpoints quick. We were talking about the introduction of PragerU into Florida public schools, and it's just a small step from there to making PragerU design the test that allows you to vote. And this is what I mean with what I'm putting here. Even if you come up with the perfect test, and I do agree that the civics test is pretty good. I've taught a lot of kids parents who have become citizens and have taken that test. But every test is corruptible. When there are stakes, like everybody who gets to vote, we saw with Jim Crow what happens. And so it's not that there's anything fundamentally wrong with having a competency test. It's just that there's no way to ensure that it won't like create racism.
And the very last thing I'll say on that is that like it is just memorizing factoids, like you guys said previously. Like it doesn't actually demonstrate even true understanding. Like it would be one thing if it was an open-ended essay, and like, well, how do you feel? Like what does the Constitution make you feel like? Right? I don't know. Whatever. Like if
that would be good. That would actually be really good, probably.
Yeah, like if you had an open-ended thing, but like it's just memorizing factoids, and then you immediately forget the factoids and whatever. All right.
Actually,
but we're moving. Shut up. Moving on. All right. So, to the audience, if you've been enjoying this content, consider helping us out so that we continue providing this content in the future. We do need your help. So, new month, new day. So the leaderboards are pretty much all open. So consider subbing to the channel. I haven't done so yet. Gifting bits or gifting subs, or what's the other thing? Resubbing, that's a good thing. Or you could use a hype chat. Hype chats on Twitch and super chats on YouTube are read out loud on panel. So I'm going to ask anything to these great people. You want to try to determine like why Lactwood is the way he is? Well, then put it in a super chat.
Because he's smart. High IQ.
Because of high IQ. There you go.
He's Canadian.
And that too. There's something about it corrupts you. But anyway, yeah, so then consider helping out with a hype chat or a super chat. That's how we power this community. How I can do all this for you. So if you want more of this, then consider helping us out. Hey, Lycan TV. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. I hope you're doing well. Anyway, let's continue on. Next topic. Okay. Topic 2. Eastern European nations are taking actions against ethnic Russians. Lithuania has declared 1,000 Russians and Belarusians to be national security threats and is expelling them. Latvia is demanding that 20,000 Russians pass a Latvian language test or be expelled as well. Latvia specifically says that this is in response to Russia, which invaded Ukraine on the pretense of protecting the large Russian ethnic minority there. Do you think that such measures are reasonable? Latvia specifically borders Russia, so is it logical that they be worried about a similar invasion on similar grounds? Or is expelling residents along ethnic lines never a reasonable solution to any problem? So yeah, I thought this was an interesting question from our friend Aiko. He sent me this, so shout out to him. And I definitely agree this is an interesting thing to talk about. So we're once again talking about tests. But the heart of the matter is, like, is it reasonable to do an ethnic cleansing campaign? Is it reasonable on national security when you have a belligerent military power on your doorstep to try to take actions to protect yourself, even if that means removing some of their citizens or people who come from there? So anyway, I'd love to hear what you all have to say. We'll start with Lactoid.
Yeah, no, this is a tough one because I understand the logic behind it, right? Russia did invade Ukraine, with a lot of the pretext being because ethnic Russians were under attack and being oppressed, and so therefore Russia needed to move in. The reason why I don't think it's reasonable here, though, is because both of these countries are NATO. They're protected by Article 5, nuclear war, and the entire force of the U.S. military. The likelihood that Russia's going to invade any of these countries is so insignificant that I don't think it justifies what essentially here is like a pretty scary thing to do, which is like target like ethnic groups for removal from the country. Generally speaking, I would oppose such things. I think to be honest with you, I'm actually pretty in favor of people being able to exist peacefully in a country wherever they would like. And so the Russian people who have been living there for the past 50 years, I think they're totally fine staying there. I think this is too far.
Okay, let's go to our friend Corey.
I actually echo some of the same sentiments that Lactoid just went through, of where it seems like it's pretty tough, but also at the same time, there's some parallels to, let's say, my particular circumstances in my province, where Quebec, in Canada, or unique nation within Canada, sort of has an interesting relationship with like language. And that as part to pretty much gain your permanent residency here, you're pretty much, it's mandatory to prove that you acquired some sort of proficiency with the French language. And Quebec has like actual language laws to uphold their language in the name of culture. And so there is some sort of expectation of, let's say, some sort of assimilation or cultural assimilation. So I can see sort of the argument there from that context. But yeah, to pretty much wrap up, more or less, I err on the side of what Lacto said. Like, this seems to be a little bit too far, given the circumstances. And I'll leave it there for now.
Next, we'll go to our friend FK, please.
Yeah. I'm not surprised Eastern Europe has like severely anti-Russian sentiment, but this seems to go too far. I don't know though if I would be against, like, during a time like this, if parts of Eastern Europe were like, hey, we might put a little bit more scrutiny on like people who might have like ties to the Russian government or have like extremely pro-Russian ties, and they're like living in parts of Eastern Europe. I don't know. I find it hard to be like completely against putting more scrutiny towards it. Now trying to like separate them from society and treating them as second-class citizens when you're like just going off of only looking at them and being like, that's a Russian, that I don't know about. That's it for me.
Let's go to Straight.
I'm gonna come out with a really hot take that ethnic cleansing bad. I can understand, given the geopolitical relationships and like tensions between these two countries, why they feel that taking such severe actions against the population would be justified. But I do agree that, or like, I do think that it is a crime against humanity. I think it's extremely harsh. And if it's a matter of wanting to like discourage a particular ethnic population from being within your country, there are ways to do that that don't involve just like active expulsion through like these bullshit tests or whatever, or like the removal of entire ethnic groups. I think that the state needs to be observing like individual rights and take it on an individual case-by-case basis for expulsion. What is it when somebody's sent back to their like country or whatever, like you don't I can't think of it.
Deportation.
But, yeah, deportation, some sort of like deportation or whatever. There are like better democratic channels to achieve the same end that don't result in like a lot of bloodshed and like inhuman treatment. And that's it.
Let's go to Nina.
As somebody whose family was interned in World War II, like Japanese, I'm half Japanese, and my family was interned in World War II. I feel like I was actually looking this up earlier today. I mean, I didn't have a lot of time to look it up, but it didn't really seem like there's a lot of proof that it was actually beneficial to do so. And it really just seems to be a type of xenophobia, of like a fearful, as like the citizens are just like, okay, well, I'm just scared of like people, or it's like a political move to like, to do this type of mechanism. And I or no, that's a weird word, but you know what I mean. Where I don't feel like this is at all just, and I don't understand how anyone could even clarify it as being just. Again, as having my family interned, there was no proof that I could find that the Japanese internment camps actually stopped any sort of espionage. So I think it's just kind of just, xenophobic racism or whatever you want to say. And I think it's really fucked up, to say it very mildly. And I think this is going to be something that's going to be looked back in history as being horrible.
Echo.
Yeah, the reason I suggested this topic is because I keep swinging back and forth on this issue. I can't defeat either side's arguments. And so since everyone on the panel seems to be against this, I guess I'll be the guy who presents what the other side looks like, because yeah, maybe not everyone entirely, but if just to know the history of that part of the world and what Russia does. This goes all the way back to Stalin. Actually, goes long before that. But if you'll recall, the way Stalin was able to take over Crimea before he gave it to Ukraine was he ethnically cleansed the place. What he does is he takes Russians, he brings them in, and then he gives them the houses of the people who lived there before that he pushed out. And then he says, "Oh, look, it's ethnically Russian now, so now it's ours." And then they did that again in the Donbass with the little green men, where they come in, they start harassing people, they get them out of their villages and neighborhoods, they take over the houses, and then they hold like a few years later they hold a referendum, and lo and behold, everybody's Russian. And then this is happening again right now. Wagner Group has been repositioned into Belarus, which is being annexed by Russia. Russia's already announced this, that they are annexing Belarus, which means Russia is bordering Poland. And they're surging all these troops up, and these troops are going in posing as civilians because they know that like Poland is taking in refugees and stuff like that. From Ukraine. And one of the only ways to differentiate a legitimate refugee from one of these people that's posing, just like they did in Donbass, just like they did in Crimea before, is language. Language is like the sort of the biggest test of culture there. Doesn't mean that unjust things don't happen as a result of it. This is why I'm torn on the issue. But the fact is, we have the luxury to have an opinion like here in the United States that would disallow that kind of bigotry, all right? Because we have the luxury of being in a country where we're not really at risk, even though we do complain about the Reconquista and like Mexicans coming up from the south and stuff like that. But that's not the same kind of threat that these Baltic states are facing. And so that's what puts me at a bind. That's what makes me understand what they're doing. Because when the numbers reach high enough, then they start, and they want that land bridge to that little piece of Russia that's out there that's between Lithuania and Poland. And they want to get that by planting as many Russian speakers in that pathway as possible, so that at some point they can say, no, this is actually Russian land. And I just don't see how they fight that without using language as a marker for identity.
Okay. And
what did I say about informing people, Iko? It's not acceptable.
Let's go to our
damn it, I did it again.
Friend Counterpoints, who I've missed so much. Counterpoints, thanks for stopping by here, good friend. And you can introduce yourself or jump straight into your opening.
Yeah, so no, my absolute pleasure. I do love being here. I just I got done with paternity leave recently, and I'm back in the wage cage. I'm not big enough yet to go full time. We're doing well on the YouTube channel, but not well enough to go full time. So obviously, anybody's support is appreciated. And basically, what I would say is, if you're into science fiction, science fantasy, I run a middlingly successful Warhammer channel. We're at like 47,000 subs. We actually broke 1 million views in the past 28 days, which is a huge milestone for me. That's only the second time that I've ever done it, so it's fantastic. Then also in the description below, I have the Counterpoints Coliseum, where I post debates such as this, and I have a Counterpoints essay channel where I'll be posting some edgy essays in the future. But addressing the topic, I think that I largely agree with Lactoid that this is an overstep, but I also, so we don't agree with each other for the next hour or so, I kind of want to play devil's advocate and try to articulate like the moral impetus behind it, and also how I think that it could apply maybe if it doesn't apply here. The reason why I don't think it applies here is because of NATO, is because if they invaded Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, any of those countries, and they use like majority ethnic Russian enclaves as a justification to do it, then the United States would say, fuck it. And then we just go slap them in the face, which I think is, that would actually resolve a lot of these issues. However, that does not mean that we're going to be there forever. Trump was talking about withdrawing from NATO. There seems that there's Republicans who are sympathetic to being isolationist. They would need to get a senatorial, because it's like a formal treaty, they would need to get senatorial approval, which I think would have a huge domestic backlash and international backlash. So the chances of it happening in the immediate future are low. But what a decade looks like after, economic collapse, what 2 decades look like, 3 decades look like, if we're even here in 3 decades, I don't know what that looks like. And so if the Estonians and the Latvians and the Lithuanians are playing a long game where they either say, you integrate or you get the fuck out, I do understand it logically. And then we could talk about Japanese internment if we wanted to get spicy with it too in the open, but I want to yield back the time. So yeah, so let's get into it.
Panel.
To start off, like I think I might be a little bit biased on this just because like I'm Albanian. I'm like my ties lie solely with American interest. But like my family comes from Albania, so a lot of the stories I hear, a lot of the stuff I hear is like from that perspective. And like the biggest way to correlate this would be like, imagine in America we had legitimate evidence that like Mexico was actively sending immigrants to like live in certain parts of America, right?
We already do.
And then not only were they doing that, but then also Mexico was funding like revolutionary groups in parts of America that were trying to split off of America to become Mexican. And then those areas, right? Yeah, like those areas were slowly breaking off. You could say America was doing that type of fuck shit when it came to like Texas or when it came to like expansion, but like I feels like right now we live in a very different era, and that's what we're witnessing happening in this part of the world, right? Like Aiko said, that's what was happening in Ukraine. That's what was happening in most of Eastern Ukraine, was a funding of like military groups, was a funding of getting these people to like settle in these areas, right? Was trying to fund this literal split off of like...
Who are we talking about?
Russia. We're talking about what Russia was actively doing to Ukraine.
Yeah,
Okay.
but do we know that this like 1,100 people are specifically being used as like political pawns to deliberately like settle in this area, like as part of like a broader irredentist plot? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't,
because for them to just like instantly be classified as enemies of the state is like the scary slippery slope to me. It's not the idea that you can.
Well,
like,
it's not that the people are enemies of the state. It's what we know is that Russia is actively funding to have people settle in these areas. The enemies of the state are more like the military combatants that rise up that Russia's been funding.
Right, and we're not talking about Russia, right? Mainly
of, like, colonizing that area.
Right, you're just using that as an example because we're talking.
Yeah. I'm using Mexico as an example. I'm like, that would be like a 1-to-1 of what it would look like if it was happening like on our border to us physically, right? It would be like
if Russia were
Mexico paying for that,
times
and we
our
had like.
Wait, so Aiko, can I ask something before we continue?
Mexico is multiple times our size.
Who is calling it a reconquista? Is it Mexican government officials? Is it Mexican paramilitaries? Is it some kind of cultural thing?
It's a cultural thing inside the Hispanic community here. It's regarded largely as a joke, but then a lot of right wingers like have grasped onto it and it's sort of used it as a boogeyman for
like Mexicans actually want to resettle and retake the southwestern United States to get their territorial integrity back.
About 10 years ago, there was a lot of discourse about making English the official language, and that was one of the reasons, was because we might end up like Quebec or something where there's a real risk of like people like trying to like create their own culture.
There's a fear of the southern areas becoming
but Texas
just this new like little
talks
Mexico.
about like separating from the U.S.
I know.
Yeah,
it's hypocritical. Of course.
I mean, Texas is
it's hypocritical, but like Texas wants to separate from the U.S., but Texas wants to be like the new America.
Yeah,
and they don't want to be Mexico, right?
Yeah, they don't want to become New Mexico or whatever you would call it. They want to be on their terms. But I'm just saying, like, the equivalent would be if Mexico were like massively larger than us and had a history of dominating us for like the previous 50 years, right, under an Iron Curtain,
or even a few
like
hundred.
Because that's what happened to a lot of these nations in Eastern Europe. They were, you got to remember, these people were like under Russian rule. Like, it's fucked though, because like I don't know the only way I could see, the only way I could ever see to like be able to stand this opinion is like going from the perspective of like you kind of gotta violate some people's private liberties just to like track like, do you have any ties to Russia? Do you have anything that's like measurable?
What if they do though? What if they do though?
If they have measurable ties that are like,
if they're from Russia, of course they have ties to Russia.
Well, no, but like ties to Russia as in like, are you supportive of the government? Are you supportive of the like government invasion?
Okay, so yeah, maybe you're proud of like your country. I mean, like this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the relation. When I talk about the relation with
500 Wagnerites that went to settle an area and
that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about like Wagnerites. We're talking about average citizens.
But do you think it should be?
No, we absolutely would know. What do you mean?
They don't.
No, but Nina, the question
what happened in Donbass.
The question is, should you be allowed to violate these people's rights in the first place to find out this information?
Well, that's the pretense for this, right?
Let's go to, sorry, I want to hear what Aiko was trying to say about the Donbass.
Yeah. So look, this is what happened with the Donbass, and it happened earlier, like under. Nobody remembers it with Crimea because it happened under Stalin, like a long time ago. But when they did it with the Donbass, with the little green men, you had all these people displacing people and then replacing them not just with Russian speakers, but with like Russian speakers who like understood that eventually this area was going to become Russia.
There was like the active goal.
They
were working alongside the military organizations to like
Yeah.
make sure that
They
like, they're
weren't just like
pushing
random
They're
people.
doing it
assholes,
again
like-
with Poland right now.
Okay, but
And
you think
with
that would be
the way-
fair with the Japanese, though?
I just want him to finish this point because I think
So,
it's really
Well, I'm
so
sorry.
here's the point. I asked a question in my opener that nobody's answered. I understand the objection to this as a solution. Like I said, I'm split on it myself morally. Like first thing I thought about was Japanese internment too. Like believe me, I understand that. But nobody answered the question. With these people, like with these cells coming in and doing what I just described, what's the alternative solution? Like how do you beat these people with some other method?
Well, that implies that they exist. Is that? I don't really feel like that's been a confirmed thing. They're just random citizens that have had a history of living there for like years.
This is
Yeah,
very
like why should they have to
Can I
answer for the
address
sins
that?
of their fathers?
Can I?
I
Yeah,
mean,
if
look-
I can address that,
Yeah.
that directly.
Please.
So we have historical examples specifically when it comes to Russia, when it comes to this trend. So when it comes
Sure,
to
they do
Crimea,
this
when it
type of
comes to
thing.
Donetsk,
Absolutely.
when it comes to Luhansk, when it
Mhm,
comes to
sure.
Georgia, like I think 10 or 20 years ago, when it comes to Chechnya, when it comes to all this
Crimea.
kind of place. And I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure there's
same
even
pattern.
they were trying to do the same thing in Moldova, where they were trying to like support like Transnistria as a
Transnistria,
breakaway
yeah.
state. So it's a
Mhm.
fairly common historical trend. Not even
No, that
in,
they
like,
do
the
it. I'm not
distant
saying it's
past.
happening though.
Well, right. Well, but at the same time, so the question, so somebody asked another question, which is like, how do you handle this without fucking over normal
Well,
citizens?
no,
I
to go
think-
back to no, to go to ICAO's question. No, that's not what he was asking, right?
No,
No,
but that's
that-
basically what he was asking. He's asking like,
Counterpoints just
Well,
said is
wait, I
exactly
want to
my
make him
question.
clarify.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
his
so
question.
yeah.
That's exactly
So
my
if
question.
My bad, then.
how
Yeah.
do we not fuck the normal average citizens or whatever?
That's what I was asking.
Unfortunately,
And what he was asking.
Unfortunately, what I think it boils down to, if you want to have like a civic nationalist, not ethno nationalist, we're paperwork nationalists. We want people to agree on values and principles and all that kind of stuff. I do think you need to come up with a codified, coherent, central value system. So if that is speaking Estonian as a primary language, if that is like getting educated in Estonian schools, if that is learning Estonian,
Do you think that we
if
should say
is
that
swearing-
in the United States?
do
Everyone
I
has
think
everyone has to
that-
speak English.
Yeah,
We don't have the same danger here. I don't think.
You
We're-
I
think-
think like
wait,
if the
it's
United
nowhere
States was
close.
I
actively,
feel like you guys
yeah.
are a little separate on this.
Like here's
I'm
where the issue
No,
comes in.
everybody
Like,
should
I don't
speak
think
English.
anyone
I think we should
here.
have a
I don't think
national
anyone
language.
here would support internment camps, right? But if we were back in an era where like we're going to
Counterpoints there.
war, do you support like violating people's rights to some degree for national security, right? Do these countries get to like go through the
Limited.
process of like do
No,
these
but
countries
that's
get to
the
go through the
issue.
process of like listen, like because like here's the thing, I agree with you. I don't think it should be like you're Russian, you go straight to jail, we just decide that. But like
Well,
Are-
it's
are these-
deportation.
yeah, like or deportation or any of that. I don't even know if like I don't agree with that like to that extent.
Okay,
because
well, I
do-
think
are they
we're
allowed
wait,
to,
hold
like-
on, hold on. I think
I
we
think
need
it
to
is.
I think we need to reformat this a little bit because what we're talking about is refugees, right?
No,
No,
because it's
if
not
they're
just
Russian.
refugees. Because like in that part of the
Okay,
world,
but a
it's
lot of the
it's
ones that are
multiple
talking about
people.
are refugees.
In
So what you're
Poland,
doing
there's
is
a
you're
lot of
damning
refugees.
them to sending them back to the country that they are
Well, no, no.
leaving.
But then,
So,
would you agree
the-
with the process of like how would you deal with those refugees? Do you
So,
allow them to like congregate in certain areas, or do you
Yes.
like forcefully separate them around like your country so they
no,
don't
why
get
would
like
I do no?
major
Hold on.
population centers?
One way or the other, we're not talking about refugees. We're talking about people who like settled there. That's yeah. So
Yeah, I
but
think
you think there's no
so
refugees?
I'm gonna
Example.
give. Sorry. Yeah. I'm gonna.
You can almost assume, like-
Wait. I want to get back to it. He's been waiting.
Fair enough.
I guess the only question I have to both ICO and Counterpoints is, and maybe Counterpoints, you agree with this, if because they're part of NATO now, and even, I mean, look, even without America involved, NATO still has several nuclear powers like in it. So that's immediately going to be a pretty massive deterrent. But like assuming they're playing the long game in the sense of, well, they're concerned that someday they might not be protected by NATO, and so then Russia might move in. Wouldn't playing the long game here just be like, hey, you have, like, your kids have to learn Estonian, And like we're going to teach like just like in America we teach like English language arts, right? You also have to learn Estonian, and like we have like the government documents being Estonian, and like the part
You're
of the
allowed to speak Russian. You just have to also speak Estonian.
Yeah, so like part of the assimilation process, and like in the long run, this would achieve the desired effect without what they're currently doing, which is deporting a bunch of old people who maybe are like don't speak like
but I think
those languages, but they're not relevant. They're not going to be relevant in 30 years, right?
I want to address it directly. So when it comes to like NATO without the United States, maybe this is just me. Maybe this is my bigotry against French people. Maybe this is my bigotry against Germans. I think that European armed forces are relatively pusillanimous and toothless. I think they're pussies.
What a word!
And so I wouldn't.
What is pusillanimous?
Calling them pussies. Calling them pussies.
Yeah, so
ironically, that's what it means.
Yeah. So
I
literally
that's where the word comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I was Latvian, Estonian, or Lithuanian, I would not trust the future of my country to French and German interventionists. Yeah, it would. It would literally be Poland and the UK because Poland wants to go to war with Russia.
Yeah,
and the UK is a nuclear power.
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, Russia's a power, and I would expect the UK, if they didn't have the support of the United States, to toe the line with the rest of the Europeans that they're relatively neighbors with. So that's where I think the Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians being paranoid is somewhat justified. Then when it comes to like, is forcing ethnic Russian settlers in these countries to integrate into society a better solution than deporting them? Yes, the answer is unequivocally yes. But if they refuse, if they say, fuck you, we're doing distance learning in Russian, I support Vladimir Putin, you can't tell me what to do, I might have Estonian citizenship, but I have dual citizenship with Russia, and they have a fucking Wagner fucking like bumper sticker on the back of their fucking truck, then fucking deport their asses, and I wouldn't give a shit.
But I want to hear from Straighteray, Nina, and Corey, because like they haven't like. What is your guys' opinion on what Counter just said? Because that's kind of what I was thinking too. Like,
because
if somebody has these allegiances, go ahead.
How is this not the first stage of a genocide? Like
okay, I want to address.
Wait. You're saying that they have allegiances.
I want to address
Corey.
I want to. So I bring up Quebec for a reason. Where Quebec, they have actual language laws, and that to come here, even just in Canada, you have to prove that you can speak. Like we have two official languages, English and French. Would you characterize what Quebec does as a genocide?
Straightaway.
Wait, who are you asking?
I'm asking.
So you to go there. So you guys would not accept anyone.
Kind of a cultural genocide, yeah. Because I don't think that there should be internet like language requirements.
Yeah, that's psychotic in my opinion. I agree with that.
You would agree that Canada engages in cultural genocide, given that we have language.
That makes sense. Sure.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Should hold on. Would you apply this to like teaching all subjects?
To support the Estonian policy.
Yeah.
I think that
I think we have enough technology. You can just use your phone to translate. I don't think you really have to speak the language to live in a place.
Okay, but you're missing a moral component to this, which is
you're missing a whole bunch of moral history as well.
Which is if it's voluntary. If you're moving to Quebec and you're like, I want to take advantage of the society and the culture and the buildings and the
we're talking about refugees
and the French lycée.
We have refugees here.
We will, and I'll differentiate that shortly. So Nina, to kind of steelman when you keep bringing up refugees. I think there are people who are escaping the Russian government because they don't like Vladimir Putin and they think that he's a totalitarian dictator and they want to take advantage of European economics. I think those people exist, and I do think that there's probably a few generations of people who settled previously. Yeah.
You're talking about Russian citizens?
Yeah. I think like so for instance, like I shop from a store called Liber Dominica. That was a Russian based company that was building third-party bits for Warhammer 40,000. Because of the war, they fled to Estonia and reformed their business in Estonia. So yeah, there are absolutely Russian people who flee to these countries as a result of like the political problems.
Right, and you would consider those refugees, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that if they told the guy from Liber Dominica, if they said, hey, listen, we understand you're from Russia, you're fleeing political persecution. As a part of your deal staying in Estonia, we want you to send your kids to Estonian-speaking schools, and we want you to learn our language. I think that's a perfectly reasonable ask.
Why should it be conditional on that?
Wait, hold on. So I'm sorry. So you think that they should have to give up their entire identity as like a family tradition because
They can keep it, but they also have to learn Estonian.
I think this
It's-
is like
it's
a very
like the
idea
hard
that-
metric to determine their loyalty.
Well,
So
to
now-
clarify,
identity
this
is
isn't
like
like out of
out of
the
nowhere.
Native
nowhere.
Americans, you motherfucker. Do you
Then-
understand that?
Wait, but like
Who?
the Native Americans is like a different story. This is more like
No, it's
like,
the
we're
exact
talking-
same
wait,
story. Though you
it's
had to
not-
send your
it's not-
kids to a different school.
wait.
It's the exact same fucking
wait,
story.
To go to Aiko's point, it's not
Sounds
the
like a
exact
skill
same
issue.
story. The issue is when it comes to Russia,
Yeah, from
we've
the Russians,
seen
apparently.
on multiple we've seen on multiple occasions that Russia will use methods like sending people and making them making them groups
Yeah.
of like refugees, or just trying to send people to settle on the borders of their nation, right? So they can expand a little bit further, right? That's what these nations are worried about. So when it comes to like, listen, we're okay with having refugees, but we need to have like other methods of like securing that like we're not having what happened
Okay, but
all
with
around
that,
us
like,
happen to
why would
us.
have to be
I don't see a
something that's
problem with a nation
ongoing
doing
instead
that.
of like a background check. Because if these are people who are trying to claim like political
because, like,
asylum, I don't
what do
understand why ongoing you're saying that you
Well,
have
because
to
the
like
idea-
relinquish.
Do you
or
have the
surrender
same
your
opinion on
culture.
that? On like people who are doing political asylum in America?
I do want to ask or have someone answer this question, because Straight Radio, I think she's touching on something. Like this idea of like a language test, like you have to learn the language. How does that ever imply loyalty? Like it's simply that you did the thing. You put effort
it integrates
into
here.
Just yeah, it's
That's
just
a part of
jumping through
why
hoops.
loyalty.
It integrates.
Yeah.
Social
So I
loyalty.
can
It's
explain
more-
this.
I think the language test is more avoiding enclave areas.
I want Lactwood and then Counterpoints to explain that, because you know I had remembered the term "little green men" from 2014 when that whole incident was happening, where like it was amazing when Russia was like, oh yeah, those aren't ours, those definitely aren't ours, but they were definitely their soldiers, right? But I didn't hear about this whole thing about them forcing people out and moving people in. I wish I had that context previously. I didn't know that previously. Like if that was the case, if we had some sort of operation like that, or an example of an operation like that happening in a neighboring country, and we were afraid it's going to happen here, then I don't know that like the fact that someone knows English, like I don't know what that matters. But like Lactoid, go ahead.
Yeah. So the
Lactoid and Counter.
Yeah. So like, and a great hypothetical would be like, let's imagine like if the laws were such that like China like could move in a tremendous amount of people because they have so many people, and like significantly sway like the politics of America to be pro-China, right? That'd be a concern. I understand the concern, right? And so the question is, now we have multiple things we have to be concerned about, right? We don't want to ethnically cleanse people. That's fucked up. But at the same time, we don't want Russia, a country which has historically dominated us, to do the same thing again, right? And so the idea with that is, well, we have Russian citizens here, and it very well could be the case that they're just trying to flee, the fucking commies over there, and they want to come and live in the Great West. I totally understand that, right? And so what these countries are doing, right, is they're saying, well, we have to make some kind of effort here to integrate them if they're going to be here. And one of the ways you integrate somebody into your country is if they can communicate and they can speak the language, and like they become established in that country, right? If you have enclaves along the border that don't speak the language of the host country and they only speak Russian, then you have a lot more motivation to be like, yeah, we want the Russians to come in because now we're part of a country in which we're actually integrated in, as opposed to the country we're currently not integrated in.
With the option, the issue to me is the compulsion to do it. There's obviously. What do you mean?
Education is compulsory in most countries. In America, in order to pass high school, you have to learn English language arts. That is a compulsory education. You have to learn math. And if somebody says, well, math isn't part of my culture, we say, too bad. You have to meet you have to meet state standards.
Otherwise, you have to earn a diploma, not to earn your citizenship.
But I think one of the issues is like in America, when you go to the hospital, you get a paper, right? And on this paper, you got English and Spanish if you're in Texas, right? At the end of the day, we have like friendly relations with Mexico. So we have this understanding that like when we're putting the Spanish language on there, it's because like we're okay with like people who only speak Spanish. Like it's a courtesy thing. It's not like we're not forcing it. But what's happened in places like Ukraine is you'll have places like the Donbass starting to fuck, I need to look this up to see if it was like correct. Like removing Ukrainian from like some of their paperwork or some of their government paperwork
and creating their own, taking over government buildings and
like they're only using
ones,
Russian on government paperwork. So it's like there's an obvious like attempt to shift parts of, and this isn't like Russia, this is in Ukraine. There's an obvious attempt to shift part of their government facilities to like only focusing on like Ukraine.
Well, and we've seen the end game right now.
We're talking about the
Donbass. Now it's officially been several of those territories have been officially annexed. So it just like they did with Ukraine. So we've watched it do it from beginning to middle to end twice over, and now we're seeing it again with the buildup in Poland.
But why is sorry? Continue. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just saying it's not. I want to get back to Nina's point because I think until we get past Nina's point, we can't argue the point that I want to argue. Nina's asking, is this really happening, or is this just like a hoax or like an artifact of history that's not happening anymore? But it's not just that it's started up again, it's that it's never stopped. It's been a continual flow of replacement people, basically ethnic cleansing, now in 3 parts of that part of the Europe.
Yeah, and if you push it back Crimea, 50 years, there's even more examples.
Way more. But in Europe, I'm just talking about in Europe, like places that we're familiar with because of the news. It's Crimea. It happened in Crimea, then it happened in Donbass, and now it's starting to happen in that little corridor between Poland and Lithuania. And so
so if that seems intentional, sorry for interrupting, but if that was intentional, like if you see a whole bunch of like ethnic Russians who are recent Russian citizens who are pro-Russia all settling in Lithuania and Estonia, and then you ask them like, hey bro, are you planning on annexing Russia? And they're like, no, but like Vladimir Putin's pretty based.
How do you know they're pro-Russia then?
Well, that's where the issue is. It's not like
they're telling you they're not. How do you know that they are?
Wait, because they're doing things like switching over government documentation to just Russian.
But you're starting with the assumption of a dual loyalty. You're starting with the assumption of a dual loyalty when the onus should be on you to prove that in every individual instance of all these people in an immigration court.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Shouldn't you prove it and then deport them?
But wait. That was the question at the start. Can you violate people's rights to like prove that dual loyalty? Are you allowed to like go into their information?
Do you mean I can't pass a fucking language test?
Aiko. So like you wanted to address that point, get that point out. I do want to get counterpoints and then Corey.
Okay, so me first, or is it me first?
Yeah, you cut. Aiko, you first.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So that's exactly the point I wanted to get at. Because this is what Russia does, is they take advantage of the liberal nature of some of these countries that they're fucking with. And they know that it's sort of taboo for us to react to what they're doing. And then by the time they do it, by the time the flags start coming out and the new governments start getting formed or whatever, it's too late. And we watched it twice already happen. Like we watched it. And we couldn't stop it in Crimea because it offended our liberal sensibilities to respond to it in any way. And the same thing with the Donbass. And we're trying now, very, very late, to try and take the Donbass back, but the problem is we're watching it happen. But this is exactly the problem that she puts her finger on it, because you can't, like, it really does offend our liberal sensibilities. It really is going to create a lot of injustice for a lot of people, because you're creating a burden of proof for the governments that this is happening to, and Russia itself doesn't put any of those restrictions or moral burdens on itself. So by the time you can prove that it's happening, it's too late.
Let's go to counterpoints and then Corey.
Thank you. Yeah, so I want to answer a question that was asked a few minutes ago. How does language tests show loyalty? And isn't this just hoops to jump through? I don't know how you guys prove loyalty to other people that are around you, but the way that I prove it is by doing things that are a pain in my fucking ass. The reason why how I prove loyalty to my wife is by working a job I fucking hate. The way that I prove loyalty to my kids is by paying for their fucking stupid ass video games and toys that they want to buy instead of the things that I want to buy. I do things that are a fucking pain in my ass in order to show that I love people and that I'm loyal to them. So when you say, well, isn't taking a test, like a language test, just a pain in the ass? How does that prove anything? It proves that you at least have the balls to do something that's a pain in your ass in order to prove that you deserve to be there. And by the way, that's already a higher bar. What's actually funny about you guys removing that very low threshold and lower bar is that, like, if there were traitors, one of the interesting things that you asked is like, well, couldn't you just learn the language and still be like somebody who's loyal to Russia and be a backstabbing traitor? Maybe you're even in a more effective traitor because now you know Estonian, so you can operate better in the country. Well, guess what? If I'm going to be betrayed, I would rather be betrayed by fucking competent people instead of fucking idiots that I just let into my country. Then finally, you said, how do you figure out if these people are being intentional or if they're just good-faith settlers / refugees when we're talking about ethnic Russians within the past few decades settling in this corridor that leads out to this other Russian province that is not geographically continuous with Russia? I borderline want to show you a map with it. And the way that you do it is through open source investigation. You check their social media. You check what they're saying in public. You have local Estonians. And if you're like, hey, that guy was a fucking asshole in the Uber the other week, and he said that Vladimir Putin was based and he wished that all the Ukrainians got fucking genocided. Put that dude on a fucking list, check his social media, and if he's blowing fucking Putin, then say, hey, bro, you got fucking 6 months to learn Estonian and fucking like swear loyalty to our constitution, or we're shipping you back to Russia since you fucking love Putin so much. That's a perfectly sensible thing for a host country to say. And actually, one more question before I leave. I already know my own answer, but I'm kind of curious about you guys. When Sweden and Norway, who have nothing to do with the conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa, accepts millions of people into their fucking country, do they have the right to say to the refugees and asylum seekers who are coming to their country, hey, we appreciate you, we love you, we recognize your dignity as human beings, but when you come here, you're not going to commit crime and you're going to learn our language? Do they have the right to do that? My answer is unequivocally yes.
Okay, let's go to Corey, and then everyone else can answer the question.
Well, I appreciate that. Whatever, no one's directly talking about it, but everyone here is just like recreating the Quebec politics and the Quebec situation and the tension between French Quebec and English Canada. And there's a reason why Quebec has French language laws, and that if you don't understand, as someone who's an Anglophone living in Quebec and has to abide by these language laws and like doesn't actually speak French, it's like I can see like both sides of like if you don't understand sort of the connective tissue that the French language has in their culture, and that's like sort of their starting point, and that's like where like that's their birthplace, and that's why they protect it so heavily, and that's why when you're an immigrant want to getting permanent residency in Quebec, like you have to pass language test. And I'm curious just to understand straighter your position, where you don't want language tests, what I understand. So, for example, the territory of Nunavut, which has a majority population, Inuit population, if they, let's say, wanted to implement language laws there to preserve their language and their culture, would you be against that?
Real quick meme. Imagine if Corey was a fucking Anglophone in fucking Quebec, and he's like a fucking traitor to the Quebecois, and he's just talking shit about them on fucking social media, and he's like, the French should all die, they're a bunch of snail-eating fucking pieces of shit. I can't wait for their stupid culture to be erased from the map. Should he be allowed to continue to stay in French Canada? And I'll shut up.
Okay, go ahead, straight.
All right. Wait, Corey, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so the Nunavut is a territory in Canada. Mm-hmm. They're approximately 80-90% Inuit. And you appear to be against any sort of like language laws or like language testing. So if they had any desire to saying, hey, if you want to like live here or like being a part of our community, like you need to like speak the language or pass some sort of test, or like we make it enshrine it in law, you would be against that. As in they want to preserve the community and their culture.
The language thing I would, the test not necessarily against, because I do think that there are democratic channels or ethical ways that you can do some sort of like screening process or something like this. I just don't think that like language is the
right. So if the Inuit wanted to preserve the language and enshrine that in law, like legislation like Quebec does, you would be against that, right?
And they're in like within their own territory?
Yeah. Like, okay. I think you're gonna upset a lot of First Nations people.
Probably, but like because my position on this isn't just a matter of like cultural preservation for the sake of that, or like blood and soil shit or whatever. Like I don't like a lot of those. Like to me, it's about
minorities. Like, I get it.
Yeah, to me, it's a lot of it is just about like respecting individual sovereignty or whatever. Like the ethics of it maybe get slightly different because you're talking about the dynamics between like what has traditionally been like the marginalized and the oppressed trying to resist like an oppressor or like settlers or whatever. But like the dynamic there makes that slightly more complicated. Yeah, but like generally speaking, I don't think it's like it's okay for this type of minority to do some like ethno-nationalism, but then this other type can't do it. Like just generally, I think it's unethical.
But I feel like where this
these marginalized
the
people,
issue
like
in this
Estonians
situation,
are marginalized in that way.
Like
the issue with this situation runs into like you have like it feels odd because I understand in these countries currently like they're going extreme. They're like, but like they have a different history. They're going wild. I disagree with like the idea of like just straight out deporting refugees. But then you run into this issue where it's like there is a level of national security. There is evidence that in the past Russia has used like tactics that are pretty like hard to tackle without violating like individual rights. Like that's I think it goes back to that same question to Straighter Aid and Nina at this point. Like, how do you deal with this? Are you okay with this idea of like sometimes you might have to violate people's like personal or private rights to get to like a better conclusion so that later on you don't have to violate their rights in a more like harsh
because
I don't think that's at all
the violation of ethics or even in the service of something good is or like what is subjectively being determined to be good in this case is still a violation of ethics like regardless.
Mm-hmm. But then does that nation then would you just say that nation has to take that risk just like
well, no, I don't think
every nation has to take risks that have like taking in refugees, of course. Yes, you have to take that risk. If you want to be a fucking xenophobic piece of shit, then sure, you can be that. But that's, I think, unethical.
Why?
Personally.
So
why?
I think it's unethical. You don't have to do it.
Why does every nation on the planet have a moral requirement to take in refugees?
Because that's literally our laws.
Borders.
Asylum laws.
We have borders and that necessitates a ton of violence.
Literally, that's like, that is...
no, you're repeating it.
Generally good.
Okay,
no, it is literally... what is the term for it? The reason why we have asylum laws, it's like a... I just don't know the wording of it. It's basically just like every country is supposed to adhere to
you're talking about
a moral obligation.
UN Convention.
I think we've
the United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugees, 1950.
Okay, the reason why we set that up. Okay, the reason why we set that up is because everybody in the international community decided that if everybody takes a bite of a shit sandwich, then it tastes less bad if you only have to have one bite.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, but what I'm saying
not an
is,
argument against that.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, let's say that you're the
And
kingdom
the
of fucking. Let's say you're the kingdom of Bhutan and you've had no international relations with anybody ever. You're on the border between China and fucking China and India. You don't even have your own delegation to the United Nations. You actually go through the Indian embassy in order to have any kind of representation whatsoever.
Okay, are you actually making anything serious? You're being so hyper specific right now that you're. I don't think I should take anything that you're saying seriously. Can you please? Is there any way for you to make an example that is not so fucking hyper specific? I don't think it should be that hard.
Counterpoints. To be fair, if they never signed into the treaty, then they have no obligation. But if they signed into the treaty, they do.
That's what I was poking at. And then real quick before I let it go.
No, we weren't.
What Just Average FK said is exactly what I was trying to.
Oh, so you just didn't want to make that argument then?
Oh my God,
I don't give a shit. I'll make whatever arguments I want. So just real quick with fucking Lactoid, he had a ridiculous hypothetical, but I think it's like a very interesting thought experiment. China has 1.4 billion people. Let's say that we just gave everybody the right to vote, like as soon as they show up. They could literally send the entire population of the United States to the United States, and then those people, if you basically didn't have
China can just do that.
Go ahead.
Yes, they can. It's a hypothetical for a reason.
Like if we gave them the right to vote as
soon as
Hey, shut up! Everyone, shut up! Hold on. Sorry, I do want to move these things along. Everyone keeps interrupting. Please let Counterpoints finish.
Yes, and this is a hypothetical, so no, I don't expect China to put 400 million people on the plane tomorrow. Although it would be a good idea if they wanted to do birthright citizenship and then vote us into China. But technically, let's say that we had no restrictions on the rights of anybody, and we just let 400 million people, Chinese people, come to the United States tomorrow. They would still have 1 billion people back home, and then if they were full citizens under the law, they would have the ability to vote to become a part of China, and they would literally have a 51% majority without even getting below 1 billion people. So what would you do in that scenario? Would you start your ethnic genocide?
No, you can answer. You can answer, and then I'm going to go to. I'm saying you can answer. Shut up.
Okay,
and then I'm 100% shut up.
I thought you meant right now. I'm sorry. I thought you meant right now.
Yeah. So Nina, you're gonna answer, and I'm gonna go to Lactoid, Ico, and Single, and FK.
Honor, will you be here for me? For my turn?
What? Who?
When it's my turn, will Connor still be here, or is he leaving?
Oh, yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be here till 11:30.
Just really quick. I just want to say, like, you know, we don't already simp for China. Like, we are a capitalist. Do you think that the Chinese market isn't a fucking huge part of our fucking country that we simp for them constantly? Are you serious that you're gonna act like, oh, all of a sudden we would be super upset if a bunch of Chinese people voted to be part of China? Like, also, how the fuck do you vote to be part of another country? That is the most fucking dumbass low IQ bullshit that I've ever fucking heard. Do you have any idea how this works?
Can I respond to that?
Where did they find you?
I would like to respond to that.
You can respond.
So number one, I think that even with your point that you just made, you would concede that if the United States bent the knee to China politically, because we had 400 million Chinese citizens, that would be an objectively worse world with a dystopian government. And then two,
no, I didn't say that at all.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. And then my second point
I didn't say that.
Hold on. Okay, well, I'm rebutting what you said.
Counterpoints. In your hypothetical,
you asked me what I was saying.
We're throwing so much at him.
The second point, yes, and then the second point is that most countries, that are democratically or Republican formed, actually form the exact way that you described it, where you vote on Articles of Confederation and the Constitution and all that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, in the conversation that we're having, this is exactly what happened in Donetsk and Luhansk.
Yeah, that's why we were able to make DC a state, even though everyone likes that, and it's a very popular position.
I don't think this is a rebuttal, but that's okay. That's fine.
DC is also more relevant than your Luhansk and Donetsk argument.
Sorry, because I want to skip
DC isn't even a state.
I just want to skip past this point very quickly. Look, each state has had to ratify whether they want to be part of the United States. Like, they take a vote to get to join us, right? And right, like, if we're talking about the whole thing about doing it by putting in friendly ethnics into that territory, that's literally what the U.S. did, right? So for every state, they don't take that vote until it's Texas, like 51% white people, right? That's what they did with Hawaii. They just shipped a bunch of white people in there, and then after that, then that's when Hawaii gets to become a state. We've done that like every single time. All right, moving on. So let's go to
wait, but no, that would require China being the one doing that, where they were ratifying our country, but that's not how China works. Because that wouldn't even make sense on that metric.
I have no idea, but let's go to Lactoid, and then Ico and Shade Rate.
And then
okay, sorry.
Okay. Believe it or not, the country that's doing something and the values that country espouses are actually important, right? So just because it's the same thing, if China does it to us, China is a totalitarian communist dictatorship, and America is not. That's flat out, right? So it is good when we do it, and it's bad when they do it, right? It's also bad if Hitler decided to do it, right? It'd be bad if Hitler flooded America with Germans. Let's say there was a whole bunch of Germans enough to flip the electorate, and then all of a sudden, like all the Hitler, I know it wasn't. Let's say, okay.
I do
Let's
not
say
endorse this.
Well, I'm sure. Let's say, okay. Well, I personally don't want Hitler flooding America with Germans and then voting us to be part of Nazi Germany. Maybe I'm alone on that one, but I strongly believe that. Okay, so I think it's perfectly rational for a good country with good Western values and Enlightenment beliefs, and such as, individual liberty and not taking over the world in a 1984 Orwellian hellhole.
Loading with that good phrase.
Yes, I'm loading the fuck out of this because these are terrible people, right? The Chinese Communist country, Chinese Communist Party is made up of terrible people. It just is, right? It's made up of Orwellian 1984.
The individuals?
If they're part of the CCP, yeah. Absolutely.
You don't really have a choice. Is the average Chinese citizen part of the CCP?
I don't know what the membership is. I know that the political
You
elite
are
part of
required,
it.
if you have a
The
job, you
political-
are required to be part of it, yes.
I feel like
I
Lactoid
don't-
probably
I
means
don't-
leadership or people
yeah,
who are in like
yes, the
positions of
leadership.
some power.
Okay, so
Part of
are
the
you,
membership is
I
Let
want
me-
you to
let me
clarify,
amend,
are
let
you
me
talking
amend.
about the leadership?
Let him amend.
Yeah, and the leadership and anybody who supports the leadership is a bad person.
And anyone that
so-
supports the leadership.
yes, and I don't want them to flood America and annex it into China. That'd be a terrible.
Okay, so you're just a fucking racist.
And
like, you've
literally
been
my
this
job.
entire fucking time. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yes, I am a racist because I don't want
actually-
America to
Yes,
become
you
part of
are.
the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, you
It's not
I
xenophobic
guess
cunt.
so. I guess so. Okay, so
She's
if
not saying
if
that
that's
because your
racism,
last point
if that's
is
racism,
because you're
It's
making the
xenophobia
assumption
and
that
racism.
Chinese
Fine,
people
yes.
are controlled by
Yes,
yeah,
yes, it is.
if that's
Yes, it is.
racism, yeah, then I'm a racist. Fuck it, I don't give a fuck. If a
And
and by the way, if it's also
Would you also
racist,
admit to being a xenophobe?
like, hey,
Lactoid.
but, hey,
Lactoid, you know
let
what
me
that word
finish.
means.
Let me finish. If it's also racist, if I was to oppose Hitler's plan, let's say,
Mass
of
being a
sending in enough Germans to switch the American electorate to become part of Nazi
Yeah,
Germany.
if you thought that just
If that's
German
also
refugees
racist,
coming
if
into
that's- if
America
that's- if
was
that's-
going to do
stop
that, yes, that
talking
would
for
be
fuck's
xenophobic.
sake.
You understand?
Okay.
You
You're not
cannot make a
people
good
did
point.
have this ideology.
Prime, let me finish.
Wait a second. Our friend Lactoid has to finish his point. Let him get it out, and then you
Go
can
ahead.
attack him. All right, Lactoid, please.
Yeah. So if opposing 1984 Orwellian communism and Hitler is racist,
Those are the same thing?
Stop it, Nina.
then I suppose if that is what you define as racist, then I guess I would identify as a racist under your definition. But my question really, this was like a preemptive part. My question really was to Aiko and Counterpoints here, which is I think we've established that yes, we don't, Estonia has a perfectly valid interest in not wanting to be taken over by Russia. We have a perfectly valid interest in not being want to be taken over by China, et cetera, et cetera. Why is deportation do we all agree that deportation is like a bad idea? And shouldn't we just do what we do in America, which is mandate the curriculum? And if you don't learn it, then you're truant.
That's
and
what
then
they're doing.
Well, there's a difference between deportation and expulsion.
That's what they're doing. Like they're
What's the difference?
They're expelling the people who won't get with the program and learn Estonian, but they're giving them the option to be educated in the language. So they're doing exactly what you're describing.
Then that's fine.
Yeah. Well, except look, so I wanted to. Is it my turn? Can I say something, or are you guys still?
Yeah, you're fine. But now I agree with the completely.
I don't get a rebuttal.
Like a hell of a
fine.
devil's.
So here's what I wanted to
devil's,
say. Anybody watch the show? Okay, I was just listening to Counterpoints when he was talking about when the topic was, does learning a new language really change your mindset that much? Does it do that much? And my example for that is, does anyone see the show The Americans?
Yes.
With the
I was
two
literally
Russian
just watching
spies.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it good?
So
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, it's amazing. They're Russian spies. They come in. They do exactly what the little green men do, except they're not trying to. Well, they'll overthrow the government if they could, but they understand what their limitations are. But they kill people. They're spying for the Russians. They're trading secrets. They're doing all this stuff. But by doing so, in order to be good spies, they have to be perfect Americans, have no accents. They send their kids to local schools, all that stuff. The kids don't know what they do. They go out at night and murder people and then come back and tuck their kids in bed and stuff like that. But here's the thing. Their kids end up with a fully Western value system by the for the beginning, actually. But then they themselves become changed over time. I'm not saying they become good people, but they're not the same people by the end of the show, over the course of it takes place in the 1980s. So they're doing all the spy shit that really was happening in the 1980s, trying to sabotage the space shuttle, stuff like that. And the point is, by virtue of learning the language and having to fit in with the neighbors when they're not secretly murdering the neighbors because they almost got found out and stuff like that. But eventually they start to actually
become
becomes a
American.
threat to the marriage because one of them starts to become more American than the other.
You don't have to tell the whole plot. Go ahead.
But my point is, it's the language, it's the culture, it's that sort of melting pot that does happen in these countries, and language is a big driver of that.
Oh
and
my
I think
God,
that's why
that's so
Corey
true.
keeps talking
Quebec?
about
Yeah.
Quebec. Yeah, that's why you keep talking about Quebec, because it's an incubator of culture.
Well, and if I could even give an example today, I do phone sales. I was talking to people. I get on the phone with this Indian gentleman and heavy, thick accent or whatever, and I'm looking at his names, and it's Rai Gupar or some shit. His son's name's some Holly Gupar, and then his fucking son gets on the phone, and it's like, "Hi, Sam Halley." And it's like, it sounds like fucking Chet, the fucking local skateboard.
This is literally,
dude, I'm him. No,
this is literally my job. My students,
ahead.
their parents are bilingual, and their parents only speak Chinese, and they always bring their whole family over, and so I'm watching it happen in real time from one generation to the next to the next. The generation that's with me doesn't really even speak Chinese. Yeah, a lot of them. So if they were born here, because their parents like very expressly didn't want them to, and they've become very westernized. So I mean, I've watched this happen in real time. So I think that might address your issue, Lactoid, because it might be true that like the Chinese government that has a reason for sending people out to the West, but then they can't fully control what happens to them once they're here.
Right, because we control the education system, right? So that's
right. Yeah. Yes, agreed. Yeah. That's what I think Estonia is trying to do as well. And that's why, even though I think it's problematic, I'm starting to get more and more convinced. Especially when I heard that Quebec, to not take that position is to think that Quebec is committing genocide.
And it is doing cultural genocide.
So I can't take it.
Okay.
If they weren't offering the courses, though, then I would have a much bigger problem with it. But if they're basically saying, we're going to teach you this.
Yes. No, let's straight away speak.
All right.
Okay. So hold on. Sorry, hold on. I regulate who speaks. Thanks. Great. Anyway, I do want to, but I actually did have a question because of frustrated rate. Like you previously said, that you didn't like citizen tests until later on. You said that you're fine with citizen tests.
Not that I'm fine with it, but that I think sovereign nations probably do retain the right to be able to institute that as part of their immigration policy or even asylum policy. But there's a difference between a country, a sovereign nation, having the right to do that. And in this hypothetical, I don't know if I'm a part of it or whatever. So if I were a citizen, it's yes, the state retains the right to do that. Would I vote for it? No, but they retain the right for their country. People, they're citizens to democratically decide that that's something that they find acceptable.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Because I think it's less than ideal, but I don't think it's unethical or a human rights violation.
Okay, well then, what else do you want to say?
The other thing I want to ask Connor about is in your hypothetical, I feel the one with China and the 400,000 people or whatever. There is a difference between
100 million. I think 400,000
was
to
it
do it.
400 million. Yeah.
Was it 400 million? Okay,
I don't know. I don't sway and elect the entire country of the United States.
No, it was 400.
Right.
Just four, actually. Just four.
In your hypothetical, though, you're I can't tell if that amount of people is being artificially supplanted and basically expelled from China and forced to resettle into the United States, or if it's part of a broader conspiracy or plot to artificially install this native population into another country to replace them, because then that would just be colonialism, or if you're talking about the encouragement of migration and free immigration or whatever, all of it kind of got muddied in that. And so it's of those 400 million people, if some of them are part of a broader conspiracy or whatever, I would say that's illegitimate. If they're trying to be expelled from their country and installed in another, I would say that is that's wrong or whatever, because that's what you're talking about is almost a high-tech invasion, and no, I don't think that you don't a country necessarily has to turn the volume all the way up on the poll factors or whatever, but well, go for it.
Yeah, if I could address it. So it's not necessarily something that I think is practical or real. I don't think that this is going to happen or anything. I'm just saying that based off of the moral frameworks that we're establishing, where people have the right to live on whatever part of the planet that they want to. Technically, we don't have the right to expel them or deport them. We don't have the right to compel them to learn a new language. We don't have the right to compel them into our moral system. And if they object to being compelled to our moral system, then we can't deport them. It's rawly hypothetical. But if you actually take those on as principles and then you extend them out to their logical conclusions, China has 1.4 billion people. I agree with Lactoid that they are a dystopian, Orwellian, authoritarian fucking nightmare. And if you could find 400 million Chinese people who believe in the CCP more than they believe in the United States, and if we had a very lax attitude about integration, there's technically nothing really stopping them from basically, like you said, colonialism. There's nothing really stopping them from doing the colonialism. So the reason why I'm kind of, my moral prescriptions might be ugly. I think they are ugly in a certain way. Corey was talking about how he lives in a French majority area. I'm sure because the French are rude, I'm sure he's experienced some actual anti-Anglo bigotry. And it was like, ew, you fucking English speaker, get the fuck away from me, which doesn't make you feel good as a person. I experienced that in Belgium when I was French.
Actually, I love it though, by the way.
No, it's very interesting because then it's like a skill issue in order to integrate into the society. But that happened to me in Belgium. Like people were bigoted against me because I spoke English and not French, and I had to learn French in order to assimilate to the culture. But I do think that it's the right. It was very difficult. I had to fight in a language I didn't even understand. But the hypothetical situation within my moral framework, I'm saying that the United States has the right to turn those planes around sight unseen of the people in the planes. They have the ability to say, sorry, despite our liberal constitutional pretenses, you have to get the fuck out of here and it's not my problem.
Well, okay, but turn them around, or do we have the right to literally gun them down as an impending invasion? Is that how far you go to see these people?
I wouldn't go that far, just because I do believe in the laws of war. I'm not Lactoid over here who thinks that you can just fucking white phosphorus bomb fucking planes filled with civilians. That's not my vibe. But at the same time, no, I don't believe in. Yeah, exactly.
Pusillanimous.
Pusillanimous. I don't believe in machine gunning civilians, but I do think you have the right to detain them. I do think you have the right to investigate them. I do think you have the right to turn them around. And then if they threaten you with deadly force, then you have the right to kill them.
But then comes the reverse on you, Straight Rate and Nina. Do you how far does the right go for you guys to make sure that they're not a threat?
Why are they a threat?
It's not like this is just any immigrant is a threat. This is specifically with Russia and the history that Russia has within these nations.
You think Russian citizens coming to the United States are a threat?
No. We're talking about Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia.
Yeah,
Russians
we're talking
coming
about
to Latvia.
Okay, but are you asking about if
I'm
I'm Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia? You're saying that, yes?
Yeah, I'm asking if you're in their position, how far do you think your rights to security and what you're allowed to do goes? And their rights
I think
to,
monitoring our borders, that's totally fine. Maybe monitoring the same way that we would do in the United States, the way that we're all monitored, assuming we're all in the US, and I know Lactoid's in Canada. But I'm sure we all have the same sense of our phones are probably monitored to some extent. I'm sunless because we talk about politics, so it's probably just natural. Whatever.
When can they expel you?
Where am I gonna go?
No. Okay, so let's use the Russian example specifically. So let's say you're a Russian citizen, you're going to Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia. You're claiming some level of refugee status. What action do you have to take or not take when you're in those countries that would entitle those countries to deport you?
This is from just your opinion.
I don't see anything that you could do that would make you deport. If you do an illegal action, you'd go to jail inside of that country.
What if we found out you had I'll go to something that I think is probably an extreme. What if we found out you had a tie to the Russian government, that you were there in a settlement program? That's probably the most extreme we could go. Do you think at that point deportation would be okay?
Are you asking me or Counter?
No, you and Straight Rate, I guess. Either one of you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't understand your. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Can you clarify exactly what you mean?
If one of these countries found out that one of the people was there and they were part of a settlement program funded by Russia to try to do what they did,
kind of a Zionist program, type of thing.
Actually, that would be probably the perfect example. What's happening in Israel to Palestinian settlements.
I still don't. If they're doing something illegal, I think that it would be I think it would come down to a legal system. of being like, are you doing a violent crime, right? Like, and are you
That's the issue.
are you
It's not a
committing a
violent
crime?
crime.
If it's
No,
a
no, hold on. Well, you asked me
misdemeanor
the question. Hold on.
versus
You
a
asked us the
felony, which is a
question.
violent crime
Yeah.
is like going to come into the fold to me.
But that's not violent. That's the issue. This is more like
I'm just saying, like, okay,
coming
so
there under other pretenses. And they're
okay, what do you
settling there.
think the pretense is for Zionist people? Like a lot of people are not like being like, I fucking hate Palestinians. I want to kill them.
Well, the
No, that's
pretense
not.
for Russians,
That's not.
But
the
Nina,
pretense for
so
Russians
I want to
isn't
ask
I
you the
hate
question.
these people.
No. He asked it very specific about settlements.
And
We
I
need to
wanna
stay
ask
on
you-
that topic.
Yes,
Right?
and I want to ask you a follow-up one for that
Well,
specifically.
I want him to.
So if I'm understanding your moral perception correctly,
Well, he was
you're
asking
saying
me a
that
series
the
of questions.
Palestinian, you're saying that the Palestinian Authority, if there were
Nope.
Jews who were coming into Palestinian territory,
No.
you would have the right. Okay, well then what?
This is why
Then
you're
what are
wasting
you
my time.
saying?
I want
Yeah.
him to finish what he's saying because you didn't finish asking
I
your
was gonna
question. He's
ask you a question.
extrapolating for something where you didn't finish your.
Yeah, I can
commentary.
extrapolate it. I can extrapolate.
Yeah,
it.
stop
Like,
interrupting
the
Nina.
issue,
Jesus.
the issue with the like Palestinians and Jewish one, or like the Jewish issue, is like they both have these differentiating stories. They both start from like different points in history. It's like really
Sure.
complicated, right?
That
you could
that is
argue
way more
if
simple
we-
to me.
Wait, I mean, like it could be more like the methods they're using right now.
Let
I
him
could argue are
cook, let him
pretty
cook.
bad. But
just
when
get
it
the
comes to
question out.
when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, like I mean, I guess technically
Well-
we can use that same argument, but it doesn't feel
Oh my God,
right.
just
No,
get to the
I
heart
wanted
of the
to
question.
say.
Get to
I
the heart
wanted
of
to
the
say on
question.
the.
So like yeah, the
Zionist
settlement
part.
thing. So yeah. So like
Yeah, if we found out
Yeah, I
that
wanna
somebody
say
was
the
doing
settlement
that,
thing.
if we
Yeah.
found out that Russia was actively trying to settle in like Latvia, for example, right, and they
Mhm.
had like, let's say we had like the most extreme the documentation that this person was settling there under the pretense that they were just immigrating, right, as a refugee. Are you okay with
Wait,
deporting
but you
that
said that
person?
it was.
Yeah, because that's not a refugee. That's somebody that you have demonstrated is actually like
Now-
duly loyal.
No, I agree, right?
Mhm.
Nina, do you agree with that or no?
Okay, I wanted to keep on using the Zionists as an example, and I guess we want to move away from that. Is that where we're wanting to go?
The
Because
Zionist was more like a comparison. I guess like the example would be like if
because
somebody from
okay, wait,
New
hold on.
York moved
Let me
to
do
Israel
something really quick,
and
really
settled in,
quick,
like, the West Bank.
really quick point, and then we can move off of this. Okay, I know it's a really complicated subject. We don't have to get into it like in depth or anything like that. Like I'm not trying to get like in the weeds with this. I'm just saying like a lot of people that are like Zionist recruits are just like Jewish people that are from the United States and shit like that. Like they're just like people who have no fucking clue what's going on. It's just they're religious, so they end up going there.
No, that's
and then they settle, and they're told that that's what they're supposed to do. So then that's how it ends up.
But
So they're kind of just dumbasses, and they're a
agree
little
with you.
bit unaware.
I
about
agree with
this.
you, Nina, but
So
that's what's
are you
argued
going
about
to
the
use
Russian
that-
settlers, right? It's argued that
Okay.
people in Russia are told that, like, listen, this land is like ethnically ours. We expand towards these
Right,
areas
exactly.
were already ours. We lived in these areas. These were our lands. You move there,
Right.
you're going to have a better life.
Mhm.
You're the beginning process of like creating the greater Russia,
So
right?
do you think
That's
that we
the
should
argument
deport
that
those
these, like,
people, or maybe let them live there, but not in the same conditions that they were promised?
Personally, if somebody had just that mentality, I'd be okay with them even having that mentality as long as they don't have any like ties to Russia. But I would still argue that if you're moving into these countries, you probably have some duty to like try to become homogenous to these countries. When Aiko brought up earlier language, it like struck a nerve with me because like I've seen my parents move here, right? My dad learned the language.
Well,
My
they
mom
already
didn't.
do though,
The
right?
way wait, but the way they interact with like society around them is fundamentally different, right? My mom will never get some connections that my dad has built with people who speak English, just because like it's this different feeling when you can actively
Sure.
like communicate with someone. It's this different feeling when you can spread back and forth like what it is you're thinking, what it is you're feeling.
Sure, but if we've agreed about like the Zionist aspect of it, like you think that you have like familiar ties because maybe you have like origins to like that land, where the same thing could be said to some extent when it comes to Russian people in those lands. And again, I'm not saying that Russia it should take over those lands. Obviously, I am very anti-Russia. I am very pro-Ukraine. However, what we're talking about is the people. We're talking about the people in other countries
But
that
that's
are
the
not.
question. Should those people who moved there for
Exactly.
the process of trying to like settle as Russians, do they have a
Yeah,
right
so
to
Nina,
do
answer
that, or
that
does the
question so we
state
can
have
move
a
on.
Okay,
We
right?
only
but
have 2
okay,
minutes
that's fair. Like, okay, so if they're there to settle as Russians, I think that people are people. I don't think that necessarily, even if you are like completely misconstrued about it, and you're constantly exposed to a lot of different cultures. I imagine if you have kids there and they grow up there, they're not going to be like
That's what
as
which is what-
Russian as Russians
which
are.
is
You know,
what
what I mean?
Aiko
Like
was
they're
saying
gonna.
previously. So I'm gonna move on because So I want to ask Straight Away a quick question. I'm going to counter. So Straight Away, you said this before, and so hopefully this is a quick answer. Well, what is the difference in your mind between deportation and expulsion?
To me, expulsion sounds like the forcible removing of somebody like by like an active like agent of the state or something like that, like a violent displacement, versus like deportation. To my understanding, when you have been marked as like somebody who is like you've put in a claim for citizenship or asylum and it's denied or whatever, you're given like a time frame or period to leave.
Yeah, it's like a legal process.
And it's a legal process, and it's illegal removal or whatever. And it's like, is this ideal? No, but it's certainly more humane and like actually through a democratic channel at the very least that is like trying to respect some semblance of human dignity and human rights, as opposed to the expulsion or due process, as opposed to like just outright expulsion, which has little to no regard for those things. So I think that's the important distinction.
I've been waiting for a bit, bud, because I wanted to finish up on you.
So I don't. I mean, I maybe there is I guess a bit of a difference there. I see what you're saying, but like there is violence like one way or the other when it comes to deportation.
I know, but I don't want to be so reductionist to be like, oh, it's all the same. Like I do think that it is like, you know, there's degrees of separation that I think are meaningful, but I know what you mean, how it's like, how is that really any better if you're just doing it in this other systematic way? And it's like, well, it is better because one is like much more violent.
Okay, fair enough. If we do have that there might actually be a legal difference, and maybe I'm unaware, but that might actually be it. All right, I don't know. Let's go to counterpoints.
If I can, FK. So I wanted to follow up with you on this, although I wanted to target Nina, but I also don't. You know, I don't want to go down like a querying thing. So instead of doing quest statements, I'm just going to say my statement. Okay. So Israel and Palestine have a dispute over territory. There are Jews all over the world who move to Israel and Palestine they do settlements or whatever in Palestinian territory that have been defined as Palestinian territory. And they are not necessarily violent when they do so. They create houses, they build internet infrastructure, they build up settlements and all that kind of stuff. But then what ends up happening is when the Palestinians come back and they say, this is actually our territory, you're encroaching on our territory and you need to get the fuck out. The Israelis say, well, guess what? The IDF is going to back our play. And if you start killing any of our Jews, we're basically going to shoot all of you if you try to actually expel us actively from the land. So in my moral system, I would say that the Palestinians, I wish they had the ability, but if they had the ability to enforce this is the territorial integrity of the nation of Palestine. We have soldiers and police officers who are going to protect this territorial integrity. If you want to move here as a Jew, we will give you rights, but you have to learn Arabic. You have to go to our schools. You have to respect our constitution. You have to respect our rule of law. You have to obey our police officers. That is a perfectly rational ask on behalf of the Palestinian territory. And then if there's Jews who violate that intentionally, where they're settling in Palestine specifically in order to create settlements that Israel can then annex, then I think that Palestine absolutely has the moral right to preempt that action by basically demanding some level of deference from the Jewish settlers or deporting them.
Yeah,
I think that's perfectly rational.
I don't disagree with you. There's a lot of South Texas that is very, very dilapidated and fucked. And if a bunch of Hispanic people moved in and started just fixing up that area, and then like the Mexican military got involved and we're like, hey, we're defending this area, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable if America didn't have the ability to defend itself, being like, okay, well, I guess that's theirs, right? Like that shit's kind of fucked. It's really like, so Straight Rate, you accepted that like, yeah, there's probably a level to like, if we have a direct connection, you get deported. Deported, that legal process of like removed from the country. So how do you, like, do you think during a time like this, it's acceptable for
I don't think there's such thing as like righteous human rights violations. I do think that even in the case of like a state of emergency or something like that, like I realize that like, do I expect that like everybody's like individual liberties are going to be respected? Probably not, and probably all in the name of like national security or whatever. But I feel like it breaks down really quickly when those accidents don't just happen in spite of your best efforts, but when you actually like sanction them from the government to say that is acceptable treatment, because then at that point you're talking about people who don't really have any sort of like meaningful connection to like a sovereign nation that's going to uphold their individual liberties or rights. And then those individual people are like subject to get fucked. But it's like, I mean, like even in the like, I don't even like to. I don't know enough about like the like geopolitical tensions between like Lithuania and Russia and all of this or whatever. But I do know way more about like Israel and Palestine. Like I don't even think Israel is like a legitimate. I think Israel.
Well, the question would be like if Palestine
Sorry,
had the ability
what
to
were you
like
gonna say?
check
What was
the
that? Finish that
Israelis,
sentence.
could it be
Sorry,
allowed?
what was that? You were saying you don't think Israel is a what?
I don't even think Israel is a legitimate state. I think Israel is an illegitimate state, and like the like Jewish people living there are just implants. And like there's not even any such thing as like a Israeli like nationality. That's ruled by their Supreme Court back in like 2013 or whatever. Like on their ID cards it says Jew. Like all of these people, when you ask them, like if I ask a Palestinian person like where's your grandparents buried, they're gonna be able to say Palestine and go back like 9 generations. If I ask people like Jewish residents like within Israel, like where are your grandparents buried, they're gonna say Hungary, they're gonna say Australia, they're gonna say the United States. These are people who are coming to here, and it's not just like a matter of like, oh, well they want to live alongside Palestinians. Usually it's at the expense of Palestinian existence and like
Can
with
we
the
do Israel
attempt to
Palestine next
colonize
month or next week?
Yeah. Next week, would you
Anytime.
be here?
Actually, can we do next month?
Next month. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry,
Sure.
I'm so wiped, and I just want to say real quick, I do have like a hard out at 11:30. I obviously love being here, but man, this schedule's kicking my ass.
Yeah. But okay. So, thank you for saying that. Making your point there because I was really curious. I didn't want to run past that. FK, you want a quick response, and then we'll.
Like my issue is, I don't disagree. Like but like I don't know how you test the legitimacy of a state at that point because I don't know. Like, do you just go by like where your grandparents are buried, or do you go by like
No,
do you hold some general idea to like acknowledge that region of land? Like I kind of like
homesteading.
It sucks, but I kind of fall with counterpoints on the idea that like the reality is this wouldn't be an issue if Palestine had the ability to defend themselves, but they just didn't, right? Like, it would like,
and they won't.
We as the United States might not always choose the right side from like whatever your opinion is all the time, but when it comes to like a situation like Ukraine, or when it comes to like a situation like how some of Eastern Europe is reacting, I think like what our duty is probably to like let these people know, listen, don't overreact. You don't have to hate every Russian that comes to your border, but like we also have to acknowledge that like during times like this, it's probably acceptable to have like a little bit more caution, a little bit more like would you accept straight away if Eastern Europe just adopted like US policy on like FISA warrants and they had to go through like a legal process of like, hey, if you're a Russian, we're going to go through this process of like tracking your data, finding out like if you're connected to anything, we're going to go through like a court to like prove that like we have some belief that you might be tied to like a foreign government or a foreign entity that's a threat. Would you accept that?
I'm not super familiar with the exact policy that you're citing, but if it's a matter of like we are not like because Counterpoint said earlier, like if they do, like if the government takes an interest in like your social media, to me it's like that's fair game because that's information that you like willingly put out onto a public platform, as opposed to if the government felt that they had like I think like that, like see, that's a reasonable standard to me because that's just an inquisition into a background check, and like all of that is like, well, if you don't want to be suspected to be like have a dual loyalty, then you probably shouldn't be a dual loyalist, right? As opposed to like saying that like the government would be justified in doing like kind of inquisition into your private life, or you have to like surrender or like give private information. I feel like there's like a sliding scale to it where like there's some private information that's reasonable to be asked, and there's others where it's like, can we have your bank account number? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something private where I just don't think should be, that's like a fair ask for a state to say like, oh, if you want to be a citizen, you should be comfortable sharing all of your data with us.
Sure. Sorry, we gotta move on. Aiko, yeah.
Yeah, so to me, it's a bandwidth issue. So we come up with all these sort of examples, and a lot of them are kind of ridiculous because China's not going to be able to take over us like in that way. There's not that differential, and maybe India would be a slightly better example, but they would have to be bordering us. They would have to be a lot more powerful than we are. Just none of these analogies work. But when I think about being able to absorb large number of refugees and like be able to make it happen, I think one of the limits I come up across is that seems like a reasonable limit to me is what Germany did. Germany decided 1 million Syrians is what they could absorb, and they had a lot of experience like reabsorbing. They used to deal a lot with Turkey back when it was just West Germany, East Germany. Then they reabsorbed East Germany into the larger Germany, and now they're absorbing all of these, which they needed the larger population for, right? Sounds like a lot, 1 million people, but it's really like 2% of their population, less than 2% of their population.
It's huge. Come on.
That is huge, but they seem to be handling it okay. Like occasionally you'll get a story about some place that goes a little crazy.
It's a little rape, just a little rape,
a little bit of rape here and there. But for the most part, though, it's actually seems to be something that they could absorb, right? So the example of 400 million Chinese, like, yeah, obviously that's way beyond the bandwidth that we can handle. But we do have an obligation to take in refugees, so long as we're also absorbing them into the culture and making them work. A great example of a country that can't seem to absorb people is France. Like, it goes to shit all the time because what they did is they had this sort of empire in North Africa where people could just kind of move back and forth, and it exceeded the bandwidth of what they could absorb. And also they weren't trying to absorb them. Not really. Like, they don't consider them French.
Dude, you can't it's
hard
to say enclaves.
I want to let our friend Counterpoints out. And like, we're about to go into bonus time, so like there'll be extra time afterwards where we just like talk a little bit more. If anyone has to leave, that's fine. I'm going to specifically give an outro. I'm gonna give an outro to my friend Counterpoints because I know he has to leave. Corey, I see you. I don't know if we can even talk about it now because it's such a big thing. Because like what you guys are talking about is so interesting, right? And now like I want to talk about Chinatowns, right? Like in the context of everything we've just said, right? Chinatowns in the U.S. Like what does that actually mean, considering everything we just said? But we'll give an outro to our friend Counterpoints.
No, thank you kindly. I appreciate that. I really do parasocially love all of you because you give me the opportunity to argue about politics for a few hours a few times a week. And that honestly, sometimes, I have a good life, but honestly, it is one of the highlights of my week. So I want to thank you kindly for having me. And then I do want to give like an outro statement about the topics, but if you want to find me, just type in Counterpoints common spelling into YouTube. You'll see a blue and gold symbol. If you're into science fantasy, science fiction, then check out Counterpoints 40K. If you're into debates like this or conversations like this, check out Counterpoints Coliseum. It's down in the description. And then I also have an essay channel where I read for 20 minutes at a time. In reference to this subject in particular, I'm very happy that it seemed like 6 people were 5.5 people were coming out saying ethnic, what is it? Ethnic cleansing bad. And I was able to make it contentious. I feel like that is a skill that I have to make this a little bit more nuanced and interesting. That we now are like ethnic cleansing, maybe? Like that's an interesting, that's an interesting result. But I do love these conversations. And if you guys want to do a few weeks from now, if you want to do Israel Palestine, I would love to. And also states have the ability to require the people who move into them to integrate, particularly if those people are at a disadvantage, and particularly if it's out of a sense of charity. So if you are fleeing from a fucking war zone, then learning French or Swedish or Estonian should be the least of your fucking concerns. And if that helps you and your family survive, then guess what? You can still make borscht at home. If you're Mexican, you can still eat tacos. If you're fucking, I don't know what the fuck anybody else does, but basically you can still eat borscht and tacos at home, and nobody's going to stop you from doing that. So yeah, parasocial love to you and yours. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
I love you, Counterpoints.
I love you too.
Fuck that.
I love you guys too.
I love my friend
Always
Connor.
good seeing you.
He's amazing.
I love my friend
really
Connor.
I do it in front of everyone's name. I just don't know why I do it. I do it all the time. I hate it. I know. But like, Connor,
I love you guys too.
You're fantastic, and like you do actually have a skill with this of like adding nuance to conversation. Not everyone does, right? I don't always have that skill, but you always seem to. So thank you, Connor, for coming through.
Love you guys. Catch you soon. See you in a few weeks.
Bye.
Goodbye, soldier.
Yeah,